Hi, let's get small. This is what I'm calling a pillbox that I made from sugar pine with redwood for the top and the bottom. It's lined with maple and cork. Now I like this, but it feels a bit unrefined because of the thickness of the sugar pine. It's about an 1/8 inch thick. I think that's too heavy for this kind of a box. The liner's a bit too thin, and I think the top and the bottom is also a bit too thick. And I think the box is a little bit too small for pills. I mean, you can keep a few aspirin in here, but I think it could be a little bit bigger. Here's another box that I made recently, and you can see the relative sizes between these two. And so I think the boxes I'm going to make now are going to be somewhere between this size and this size. And I'm also going to incorporate some inlay. I have a little bit of ebony here, and that's to help orient the lid. When you take the lid off, you can't put it on backwards. So I like to incorporate that onto these small boxes. So let me show you how I make these. Here's the wood that I'm going to use from my exotic wood scrap pile. I think this is cocobolo, and it's going to be for the sides. I'm hoping to resaw this into at least 2 pieces, maybe 3, hopefully. And then for the top and bottom, I'm going to use rosewood. This is about 1/8 of an inch thick. I won't be able to resaw this, but I'll thickness it down to at most 1/16 of an inch, and hopefully smaller than that. I got 2 pieces out of that stick of cocobolo. So I'm not sure if these are going to be, these might be too thin, I'm not sure. So I'm going to take them to the drum sander now, get them into final thickness, and decide if I have to go back and cut some fresh pieces. When thicknessing very thin stock like this, I use a carrier board, just a thicker piece of wood with a stop glued onto the end. And that allows me to thickness extremely thin pieces of wood. Works great. Change of plans. By the time I sanded all the mill marks out, these ended up too thin for the sides. But I think they're going to be a perfect thickness for the tops and the bottoms. So that's what these are going to become. And I'll use the rosewood for the sides. Okay, well, I've completed preparing the side material. Now I dimensioned this with my drum sander, and it was murder on the sandpaper. Lots of oils in this wood. Turns out that this is ebony. As I was working with it more, I realized that's the case. I applied a little bit of mineral spirits, and this turned jet black. I have a few boxes of ebony and rosewoods that I picked up from a luthier a long time ago. He was getting rid of his scraps, so none of it's labeled. Anyway, the drum sander was rough on the drum sander, and the drum sander left deep scratches in this. So I had to use my random orbit sander to get rid of all of that, but that still left swirl marks. So then I went with my block sander from 150 to 220 grit. I'll sand it more when the boxes are actually completed. I always use a loop to inspect my work if it's something I really care about. If you think your random orbit sander gives you a nice finish. Take a look at it through something like this when you're done, and you might be surprised by the little tiny swirl marks which are left in there. That's why I always end up all my sanding with some hand sanding, which usually you only need to go with 220 and above at that point. Okay, so I'm going to cut this in half because at this point I don't want to deal with this long piece. I'm going to joint one edge, the hand plane, and then I'll take it over to the table saw, drip to the final width that I'll need for the boxes. Okay, for cutting this 16th inch thick ebony, I'm going to have to use my best rip blade. I'm going to use my Freud glue line rip. And of course I'm not going to use my stock insert. I'm going to use a zero clearance. Okay. Now that I have the sides ripped to final width, it's time to cross cut them. And I'll be using my small parts miter sled and my best cross cut blade. I like the Freud Ultimate Cutoff Blade, 80 tooth. I've finished cutting all the box parts to length on the table saw, but I'm not satisfied with the quality of the cut. Problem is that the ebony is on the brittle side and the thickness is so thin relative to the size of the carbide teeth on the blade that you just get a rough cut. So I'm going to finish all these parts off on my shooting board. My pieces are cut and I'm happy with the miters, but before I glue them up like this copy, I'm going to be placing a bit of inlay, maple inlay, similar to this box where I have a piece of ebony inlay. Okay, this is dried overnight and looks good. Now I'll just clean it up with the chisel. I used hide glue to glue this inlay in, and one of the advantages of that is I can just take some water and clean it up. And I'll do the same thing when I glue up the box. I'm going to use hide glue, and even after it's dried, it'll come off. After the box is glued up, I'll sand it all smooth. I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. Okay, we're set. So the last thing I'm going to do is just wipe these joints with just a touch of acetone before I apply the glue. And that's because this ebony, the oils in the ebony, the acetone will just make a slightly better gluing surface, I think. And I'll be using the liquid hide glue again to glue these. I'm very lightly sanding where the top and the bottom is going to be glued on. I want to be gentle because these are not the strongest joints at this point. But once I get the top and the bottom glued on, the box will be substantially stronger. And I'm just using a block with using 100 grit sandpaper. I'm just taking my time. Here's a simple technique to test whether you've sanded the top and the bottom flush. And you can use this on larger boxes. You just need a flat surface. I'm using my jointer bed. If I have a bigger box, use a table saw. And just take a LED light, it's a bright one, and stick it inside, and you look, and you can see that there's some light shining through. A little bit there, not really anything there. a little bit there. This other side, that's pretty good. Something shining through there. That looks pretty good. There's a little bit there. That's a quick, easy way to check your surfaces. Time to cut the lid. So this is really delicate. It's probably on the order of a 32nd of an inch thick. So I'm going to just use my handsaw to cut these pieces. I've already cleaned the edges with acetone. Here's the quality of the cut from the bandsaw. Now what I'm going to do is use my sanding box, again from probably 120 to 220 to get these edges flat and smooth. And then it's time to apply the finish. I have the box completed in terms of structure and the finish. I put 4 coats of spray lacquer on it. I'll be waxing it once it's fitted on the inside. And that's what I'm going to work on next. Here's my maple liner material that I ripped at the table saw and hand planed the surfaces. And now it's time to cross cut and fit to the box. Fitting this liner to the box is really not that difficult. It just takes patience and the right tools. I'll be using my small parts crosscut sled to cut these to approximate length, and then my shooting board to get it perfectly fit. So I'm going to line this up as best I can. Use my fine point drafting pencil to mark as close as I can get to the perfect length, and then I'll cut wide of that on the table saw. And I'm going to do the same operation on all four sides. I can't assume each side is the identical length. If it's off just a fraction of a millimeter, it'll affect the final fit. All my pieces cut to approximate size. I've marked them all, and I've marked the corresponding sides within the box, and I've also drew a pencil line on the bottom edge. This is also that when I cut these and insert them, I can't put them on the wrong side. And which is important because I want this liner to be a mitered friction fit, and my intention is not to use actually any glue to keep these in place because it'll be such a tight fit that they won't want to move. Before I install the maple liner, I need to install a liner on the top and bottom. Now for these typical small boxes I use cork, but I think for these Ebony and Rosewood boxes they deserve something a little bit nicer. So I'm going to install leather. I have some, I think 1 ounce leather. It's about a 32nd of an inch thick. It has a really nice texture, which I think is going to look great in these boxes. So let me show you how I install them. I'll install the bottom first, which is the easiest. I don't have to be extremely precise in cutting that since the liner will cover the edges of the leather. So I'm just going to place the box like so, draw an outline, and then cut it out. And I'm just going to eyeball it. I'll cut it about a 1/16 of an inch inside that line. There, that fits good enough. The top is going to be just like the bottom, really, except I'll be a little more precise in my cutting. Now, error on the long side. because I can always trim it. And of course, if I mess up, well, as you can see, this doesn't take exactly a lot of material. I can just cut another one. And of course, when you're doing this, you want to put a fresh blade in your knife if you don't have a sharp one to begin with. I think that's going to be pretty good. Let's glue it in. Okay, once again, I'm just using some hide glue, as I've used for everything in this box. I'm not going to put really much. The liner is going to be holding this leather down mostly. The glue will be more important in the top. The liquid hide glue really tacks up pretty quick. And that's that for the bottom. Of course, I tried to keep the glue away from the edges. That's it. Now we can fit the maple liner and we'll be just about done. This is my shooting board and my Lie-Nielsen number 9 miter plane, which I love. Unfortunately, they stopped making it. Here are my rough cut pieces, and I'll be using a backer board, a little piece, so that when I trim these sides, I won't get any tear out on the back side. The 4 pieces are cut now. Each piece fits perfectly, edge to edge. Of course, they're butt joints. Now I take them back to the shooting board and I cut the miters. And all I have to worry about is getting the 2 sides of the miter to come to a point, and I don't have to worry about fitting the length. Once I get them to the point, they'll fit perfectly, and it'll be a nice tight liner. And I'll use same piece to back up the cut, except now I use the mitered end. I just wanted to show you some of the progress that I'm making on this corner. You can see I'm about halfway done with the miter. I just keep shaving off until I get the two edges to meet at a point, and then I'm done and it should fit perfectly. Now, I also just wanted to point out that you really need to have your iron nice and tuned up. Just wanted to show you the shavings that I'm getting from these end grain. It's not dust, it's actual shavings. So make sure your hand plane is nice and tuned up when you do this kind of work. Here we go, the final fitting. If this goes together, my intention is not to take it apart again. There. So hopefully you can see nice tight miters. Inside corners are tight. And you can see how much pressure it took to put it in there, so I'm not going to put any glue on this. Now the lid was too tight of a fit because the lid is of course the same size as the body of the box. So I'm just taking my block with some 220 sandpaper. And I'm just taking a few swipes, testing the fit. Yeah, that's pretty good now. Just snug fit, not too snug, just about right. Okay, well, last thing to do before I show you the completed box is to wax it. I'm going to use this dark brown paste wax, and then I'll show you the completed box along with a couple more that I made at the same time. I'll let this dry for 10-15 minutes and buff it out. And for the final buffing, I'm actually going to use a shoe shine polish brush. Okay, well, let me pull in the camera. We can take a look at this and a couple other boxes. See how they turned out. Here's the finished box. We're really happy with how it came out. The rosewood is just beautiful. Shimmers in the light. And then the ebony, it's just jet black. You have to need really bright light to be able to see the grain. And I'm really happy with how the inlay turned out. And of course inside with the leather. I think I'm going to use that in the future. Everything about this came out great. Now I also made this, which was a prototype for this one. It has a few flaws in it, which I won't bother to to point out to you, just to show you what, like an intended purpose. It's a pillbox, just to keep some, in this case, some aspirin and ibuprofen in it. And then I made this is a finished box, just a smaller version of this, just a little bit smaller, but it's also finished with leather on the inside. I think these make great gifts, not like a birthday present, Christmas present, but just you know, here I was thinking of you and I made this little box for you, that kind of a gift. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for stopping by.